This is crazy HOA life. The chalk mark turned into a Tau in minutes. I work in medical device sales, so I am always driving, always meeting clients, always racing deadlines, and I depend on my parking spot like oxygen. That Tuesday morning, I pulled into my assigned guest spot at the Reserve at Kingsbridge Design Review Association in Bradenton, Florida, and saw Susan Garcia standing beside a tow truck with a handheld plate scanner aimed at my contractor's van like it was evidence at a crime scene. She wore a reflective safety vest over her black cardigan gray pixie-cut hair, catching the bright midday light, and she was already yelling before I even opened my door. "I am not debating you. I am issuing the notice," she snapped, thrusting the scanner inches from the plate and turning the screen away so I could not see it. I stepped out, navy light jacket unzipped, bucket hat shading my eyes, and checked my watch because I had a client call in 40 minutes. "Wait, that is my contractor," I said. "He is here with my permission. That is a guest spot." "Guest spots are for personal vehicles only," Susan said, tapping the scanner like a gavel. "Commercial vehicles require a permit. You did not file for one. The HOA has jurisdiction now." I stared at her. "He is fixing my dishwasher. That is allowed under the covenants." "I do not care what you think. I care what the rule says," she said, pulling a folded paper from her vest pocket. Section 12-7. Commercial vehicles parked in guest spots are subject to immediate tow. I took the paper. The section number was printed at the top, but the text was vague and short. I pulled out my phone and opened the covenant PDF I kept saved. Section 12-7 says nothing about guest spots, I said. It only restricts overnight parking in fire lanes. Susan snatched the paper back. "You are misreading it. The board interprets it as a blanket ban. Make it public. I love watching people get embarrassed." The tow driver climbed out of the cab, a stocky guy in a grease-stained shirt. He glanced at Susan, then at me. "You the owner?" I nodded. "This is a mistake. That vehicle is here legally." He shrugged. "I got the call. HOA authorization. If you want to dispute it, you do that after the hook is on." "After?" I said. "No. You are not hooking anything until I see the signed authorization." Susan stepped between us. "The authorization is filed with the records office. You can request a copy for $25 and wait 3 business days." I checked my watch again. I did not have 3 days. I had a meeting in 38 minutes and a client depending on a demo unit in my trunk. "This is insane," I said. "You cannot tow a vehicle based on a rule you will not even show me." "The rule is clear," Susan said. "The board voted on enforcement protocols last month. You missed the meeting." "I was working," I said, "and you sent the notice 2 hours before the meeting started." "That is not my problem," she said, waving the tow driver forward. "Proceed." "Hold on," I said to the driver. "If you hook that vehicle without a valid authorization, you are liable for damages. I am documenting this." I held up my phone and started recording. The driver paused. He looked at Susan. "You got the paperwork?" "Of course," she said, but she did not pull anything out. "It is filed." "Proceed." "I need to see it," the driver said. Susan's face tightened. "You are questioning me?" "I am covering my liability," the driver said. "If he files a complaint, I need proof the HOA authorized this." Susan pulled out her phone and scrolled, then held it up. "There. Emailed authorization from the board president." The driver squinted at the screen. "That just says proceed with enforcement. It does not list a plate or address." "It lists the violation code," Susan said. "That is sufficient." The driver shook his head. "I need a signed form or a plate match. Otherwise, I am out." Susan's voice went cold. You are under contract with the HOA. If you refuse to perform, we will find another vendor. The driver shrugged. Good luck. I am not risking my CDL over a vague email. He climbed back into the cab, started the engine, and pulled away, leaving Susan standing in the guest spot with her scanner and vest and nothing else. I kept my phone recording, so I said, "Where is the signed authorization?" Susan turned, her face red. This is not over. The HOA will issue a formal notice, and the next tow company will not ask questions. Good, I said, because I am going to request every document related to this enforcement action, and if you stall or overcharge me, I am filing a complaint with the state. You are wasting your time, Susan said. The board backs me on this. We will see, I said. She walked away, vest flapping, and I stood there with my contractor's van still parked and my hands shaking from adrenaline. I checked my watch. 31 minutes until my client call. I got in my car, drove to the meeting, and spent the entire demo thinking about what just happened. Susan was the records custodian, which meant she controlled access to every covenant, every board vote, every enforcement record. If she wanted to bury proof, she could. If she wanted to fabricate a violation, she could. And the board, a rotating cast of retirees who treated HOA emails like public shaming posters, would back her because no one read the actual rules. That night, I drafted a formal records request. I asked for the covenant section Susan cited, the board vote on enforcement protocols, the signed authorization for the tow attempt, and any correspondence related to my address. I emailed it to the HOA management company and copied Susan. 3 days later, I got a reply. Your request has been forwarded to the records custodian. Processing fee is $75. Estimated turnaround is 10 business days. $75 for documents I already owned as a homeowner. I paid it because I needed proof. 10 business days passed. No documents. I emailed again. The reply came from Susan directly. Your request is being processed. Additional fees may apply for document retrieval and copying. What additional fees? I wrote back. No reply. I called the management company. The person who answered said Susan handled all records requests and they could not override her. I asked to escalate. They said the board president would need to approve any expedited request, and the board president was traveling. I kept my plan quiet because the HOA depends on controlling the narrative, and I needed them to think I was just another frustrated homeowner who would give up. But I was not giving up. I was a sales rep. I knew how to work a paper trail. I pulled the county property appraiser records and found the original covenant filing. I compared it to the section Susan cited. The language was completely different. Section 12-7, as filed, said nothing about guest spots or commercial vehicles. It was a fire lane restriction, exactly like I remembered. Susan had quoted a rule that did not exist. I printed the county filing and highlighted the real Section 12-7. Then I requested a meeting with the board. The reply came back 2 days later. The board meets monthly. The next meeting is in 3 weeks. You may submit a written statement for review. 3 weeks. Meanwhile, Susan was already escalating. The following Monday, I came home to find a printed notice zip-tied to my mailbox post. Parking inspection scheduled. All vehicles subject to compliance review. Unauthorized commercial vehicles will be towed without further notice. The notice had no date, no signature, no case number. Just a threat. I took a photo and checked the neighborhood group chat. 3 other homeowners had received the same notice. One of them, a guy named Marcus who lived 2 streets over, posted a photo with the caption, "Anyone know what this is about?" I have a work van. Is that commercial? The replies piled up fast. Someone said the HOA was cracking down on contractors. Someone else said guest parking was being re-signed next month, and the board was using it as a trap to clear violations before the new paint went down. Another person said Susan had shown up at their house with a clipboard like it was a crime scene, measuring their driveway and taking photos of their truck. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get even more unhinged. I messaged Marcus privately. Did Susan come to your house? Yeah, he replied. Last Thursday. She said my van did not have a permit decal and she was documenting it for the board. I told her I am a plumber and I live here. She said it did not matter. Commercial vehicles need board approval. Did she show you the rule? I asked. No. She just handed me a pamphlet about parking policies and left. I need to see that pamphlet, I said. Marcus dropped it off that night. It was a glossy trifold, printed on HOA letterhead, with bullet points about parking enforcement. One bullet said, "Commercial vehicles require advance board approval and a permit decal. Failure to comply may result in towing and fines." I flipped it over. No citation, no covenant reference, no board vote date. Just a blanket policy statement. I compared it to the county covenant filing. Nothing in the covenant mentioned permit decals or advance board approval. The pamphlet was made up. I sent Marcus a message. This pamphlet is not enforceable. The covenant does not require permits. Susan is making up rules. What do we do? He asked. We file a complaint, I said, and we bring proof to the next board meeting. Marcus agreed. We started building a file. I printed the covenant section, the pamphlet, the parking inspection notice, and my records request timeline showing Susan stalling. Marcus contributed photos of his driveway inspection and a copy of the email he sent asking for the rule citation. Another homeowner, a woman named Jen who had arms crossed and a smirk whenever Susan walked by, joined us. She had been fighting Susan for months over a guest pass issue and had her own stack of documents showing contradictory enforcement. We met at a coffee shop 2 weeks before the board meeting. Jen laid out her file. Susan rejected my guest pass 3 times, she said. First, she said it was expired. Then she said it was the wrong color. Then she said guest passes were only valid for 72 hours, but the covenant says 7 days. Did she give you a written denial? I asked. No. She just sent emails saying the pass was invalid and I needed to reapply. I flipped through Jen's emails. Every denial had a different reason. It was classic bad faith enforcement. Ignore the proof, demand the same thing again in a new format, and hope the homeowner gives up. We need to force her to go on record, I said. If we ask her a direct question in front of the board, she has to answer. And if she lies, we have proof. What if the board backs her? Marcus asked. Then we escalate, I said. File a complaint with the management company. Request an independent audit. Go to the county if we have to. Jen nodded. I am in. I am tired of this. We divided tasks. Marcus would compile the photos and inspection notices. Jen would organize the email denials. I would prepare the covenant comparison and draft a statement for the board meeting. We had 2 weeks. But Susan did not wait 2 weeks. The following Tuesday, I came home to find a new notice taped to my door. Violation notice. Unauthorized vehicle parked in guest spot. Fine, $250. Payment due within 10 days. Failure to pay may result in lien filing. I read it twice. Unauthorized vehicle. My contractor had left days ago. The only vehicle in the guest spot now was my own sedan. I walked outside and checked. My car was parked legally. Guest pass visible on the dashboard. Permit decal in the windshield. I took photos. Then I called the management company. I received a violation notice, I said. But the vehicle is authorized and the spot is legal. Who issued this? Let me check, the person said. There was a long pause. That was issued by the records custodian based on a parking inspection report. What report? I asked. I do not have access to the full report, they said. You would need to request it from the records office. I already requested documents 2 weeks ago and paid $75, I said. I have not received anything. Let me follow up, they said, and hung up. I did not hear back. I emailed Susan directly. I received a violation notice for an authorized vehicle. Please provide the inspection report and the covenant section that supports this fine. Her reply came an hour later. The inspection report is filed. The fine is valid. Payment is due within 10 days. That was it. No explanation, no citation, no proof. Just a demand for money. I replied, I am disputing this fine. I will not pay until you provide documentation. Susan's next reply was 2 sentences. Failure to pay will result in lien filing. The board has authorized lien proceedings for unpaid fines. I forwarded the email chain to Marcus and Jen. She is trying to force a lien, I wrote. We need to move faster. Jen replied immediately. She did the same thing to me last year, filed a lien packet with bogus line items and mystery fees. I had to hire a lawyer to get it dismissed. How much did that cost? I asked. $1,500, she said. I stared at my phone. I was trying to keep my neighborhood reputation clean, and Susan was smearing me with fake violations and lien threats because she could. The HOA ignored my proof and kept demanding new formats, and every delay cost me time, money, and credibility. I needed to flip the script. I needed proof that Susan was not just wrong, but malicious. That night, I checked my doorbell camera footage. I scrolled back 2 weeks, looking for anything unusual. I found it. 3 nights ago, at 2:15 in the morning, Susan's car pulled up to the curb near my property. She got out, walked to my driveway, took photos of my car with her phone, and left. She never knocked. She never left a notice. She just trespassed, documented my vehicle, and drove away. I saved the footage and backed it up to 3 locations. This was my trump card. I kept it quiet because the HOA depends on controlling the narrative, and I needed them to think I was just complaining about paperwork. But this footage proved Susan was targeting me personally, trespassing to manufacture violations, and filing reports based on middle-of-the-night surveillance. It was harassment, and it was going to end her. The board meeting was 10 days away. I prepared my statement, printed my evidence, and waited. Susan sent 2 more emails demanding payment. I ignored both. Marcus got a similar violation notice. Jen got a follow-up email saying her guest pass was still invalid and she owed back fines for past violations. The 3 of us compared notes. Susan was escalating across the board, hitting everyone who had questioned her at once. She was trying to overwhelm us before the meeting. 4 days before the meeting, I got a call from the tow yard. "This is Miller's Towing," the voice said. "We have your vehicle." "What?" I said. "My car is in my driveway." "Not your car," he said. "Your contractor's van. We picked it up this morning from your guest spot." "That van left 2 weeks ago," I said. "According to our records, it was parked illegally as of this morning," he said. "You can retrieve it for $450. I drove to the tow yard, heart pounding. The address was 20 minutes away, a gravel lot surrounded by chain link fence. I walked into the office, a dingy room with a plexiglass window and a clerk who looked like he had been staring at a screen for 12 hours straight. "I am here about a van," I said. White contractor van, plate ending in 729. The clerk typed, "Yeah, picked up this morning, 450 to release." "I do not own that van," I said, "and it was not parked in my guest spot this morning." The clerk shrugged. "We got the authorization from the HOA. If you want to dispute it, talk to them." "I need to see the authorization," I said. The clerk pulled a folder and slid a single sheet under the glass. It was a printed form with the HOA logo, a handwritten plate number, and a signature at the bottom. The signature was illegible. The plate number was wrong. It ended in 724, not 729. "This plate number is wrong," I said. "You towed the wrong vehicle." The clerk squinted at the form. "Looks right to me." "It is not," I said. "Look at your records. The van you towed does not match this plate." The clerk typed again, slower this time. He frowned. "Huh. Yeah, the plate we scanned is 729. The form says 724. "So you towed a vehicle based on bad paperwork," I said. The clerk looked uncomfortable. "I just process what comes in. You need to talk to the HOA." I took a photo of the form. "Who signed this?" The clerk checked the folder. "It is filed under the records custodian, Susan Garcia." I felt my jaw tighten. "She gave you the wrong plate number?" "Looks like it," he said. "And you hooked the vehicle anyway?" "We scan the plate when we arrive," he said. "If it is in the spot listed on the form, we tow it. The HOA takes responsibility for accuracy." "Did Susan promise you extra fees if you hooked first and asked questions never?" I said. The clerk went quiet. His face changed. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Because that would explain why you towed a vehicle with a mismatched plate," I said. "If she paid you a bonus to ignore discrepancies." The clerk leaned back. "Look, man, I just work here. If you have a complaint, file it with the owner." "I want the release receipt," I said. "And I want it noted that the plate on the authorization does not match the vehicle you towed." The clerk printed a receipt and slid it under the glass. "It is noted," he said, "but you still owe $450. "I am not paying for a tow based on false paperwork," I said. "Release the vehicle or I am calling the police." The clerk hesitated. He picked up the phone, dialed, and spoke quietly. A minute later, he hung up. "Owner says we will release it without charge this time, but the HOA is responsible for any loss." "Fine," I said. "Release it." The clerk buzzed me through to the yard. I found the van parked near the back fence, wheel lift marks still visible on the frame. I took photos, checked the plate, and confirmed it was 729. The contractor showed up 20 minutes later, furious. Susan had called him directly and said his van was towed for unpaid violations. He drove out here, ready to pay, and then found out the whole thing was a mistake. "Did she say anything else?" I asked. "She said if I parked at your place again, she would have me banned from the neighborhood," he said. "She said the HOA has a list of approved vendors, and I am not on it." "There is no approved vendor list," I said. "I checked the covenants." "Then she is lying," he said. "Yeah," I said, "she is." We stood there in the gravel lot, staring at the van, and I realized Susan had just made a catastrophic mistake. She had filed a false tow authorization with the wrong plate, targeting a contractor who was not even on my property at the time. And the tow yard had processed it without verifying anything because Susan had promised them easy money. This was not an HOA dispute anymore. This was fraud. I called Marcus and Jen. "We need to meet tonight," I said. Susan just escalated. We met at my house. I showed them the tow yard receipt, the mismatched plate authorization, and the doorbell footage of Susan trespassing at 2 a.m. Jen stared at the footage. That is harassment, she said. It is more than that, I said. She filed false paperwork to tow a vehicle that was not even here. And the tow yard admitted she arranged extra fees to make it happen fast. Can we use this at the board meeting? Marcus asked. We can, I said, but I want to hold it until the right moment. If we show it too early, the board will try to cover for her. We need to let her commit in front of witnesses first. What do you mean? Jen asked. I mean, we let her lie, I said. We ask her direct questions. We let her double down. And then we show the proof. Marcus grinned. I like it. The board meeting was 3 days away. Susan sent one more email, this time to all three of us. Outstanding fines must be paid before the meeting, or your statements will not be heard. I replied to all. I am disputing all fines. I will present evidence at the meeting. Susan did not reply. The night before the meeting, I printed everything. The covenant comparison, the fake pamphlet, the tow yard receipt, the doorbell footage stills, the email chain showing Susan stalling. I organized it into a tabbed binder, one section for each violation. I rehearsed my statement twice. Jen and Marcus did the same. We were ready. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, a low building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs arranged in rows. About 20 homeowners showed up, most of them older retirees who treated board meetings like evening entertainment. The board sat at a folding table up front. The president, a retired banker named Ed, the treasurer, a woman named Carol, and Susan, records custodian, sitting at the end with her laptop open and her reflective safety vest draped over the chair back. Ed called the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda was parking enforcement. Ed cleared his throat. The board has received several complaints regarding parking violations and towing procedures. We will hear statements from affected homeowners, starting with Marcus Chen. Marcus stood and read his statement. He described the driveway inspection, the pamphlet with no citation, and the violation notice for his work van. He asked the board to provide the covenant section that required permit decals. Susan did not look up from her laptop. When Marcus finished, Ed turned to Susan. Do we have a response? Susan stood. The parking policies are clearly outlined in the enforcement guidelines adopted by the board last year. Mr. Chen's vehicle does not comply. The violation stands. What enforcement guidelines? Marcus asked. Susan pulled a printout from her folder and held it up. These guidelines, approved by majority vote in March of last year. Can I see that? Marcus said. You can request a copy through the records office, Susan said. I already did, Marcus said, 3 weeks ago. I never received it. Your request is being processed, Susan said, and sat down. Ed looked uncomfortable. Let us move on. Next statement. Jennifer Park. Jen stood and went through her guest pass denials, reading each email aloud. Every denial had a different reason. Every request for clarification was ignored. She asked the board to explain why the covenant said 7 days, but Susan enforced 72 hours. Susan stood again. Guest pass durations are determined by the board on a case-by-case basis to prevent abuse. Miss Park's guests exceeded reasonable limits. The covenant says 7 days, Jen said, not case by case. The board interprets the covenant, Susan said. I do not care what you think. I care what the rule says. Jen sat down, shaking her head. Ed looked at his notes. Last statement, from the homeowner at 42 Cypress Lane. That was me. I stood, binder in hand, and walked to the front. I placed the binder on the table in front of Ed. I am here to dispute 3 violations issued by the records custodian, I said. All 3 are based on rules that do not exist in the covenant. Susan stood before I could continue. The violations are valid. The homeowner is misreading the covenant. Let him speak, Ed said. I opened the binder to the first tab. This is the violation notice I received, citing Section 12-7 as the basis for a $250 fine. I flipped to the next tab. This is Section 12-7 as filed with the county. It addresses fire lanes. It says nothing about guest spots or commercial vehicles. Susan leaned forward. The board interprets Section 12-7 to include guest parking enforcement. Where is that interpretation documented? I asked. In the enforcement guidelines, Susan said. The guidelines you will not provide? I said. The room went quiet. Ed shifted in his seat. Susan, do we have a copy of the enforcement guidelines available? They are filed, Susan said. I can provide them upon request. I already requested them, I said. 2 weeks ago. I paid $75. I received nothing. Your request is being processed, Susan said again. I flipped to the third tab. This is the email chain showing my request, your reply, and 2 follow-up emails. The last one is from 5 days ago. You said additional fees may apply. What additional fees? Document retrieval and copying, Susan said. For a digital file? I said. The covenant is a PDF. There is no retrieval cost. The board sets the fees, Susan said. I turned to Ed. Is there a fee schedule? Ed looked at Carol. Carol flipped through a binder. There is a standard processing fee, she said. $75. I paid that, I said. Susan is asking for more. Ed frowned. Susan, what additional fees are you referring to? Susan did not answer immediately. She looked at her laptop, then back at Ed. If the request requires extensive research or document compilation, additional fees may apply. This is a single PDF, I said. It requires no research. The room murmured. Ed made a note. Let us table that issue for now. What is your second dispute? I flipped to the next tab. This is a tow authorization filed by the records custodian 3 days ago. It lists a plate number ending in 724. The vehicle towed has a plate ending in 729. The tow yard confirmed the mismatch. Susan's face changed. That was a clerical error. A clerical error that resulted in an illegal tow, I said. The contractor was charged $450 before the yard released the vehicle without payment. The tow company is responsible for verifying the plate, Susan said. You are responsible for providing accurate information, I said, and you did not. I flipped to the next tab. This is the receipt from the tow yard noting the mismatch and the waived fee. Ed leaned forward. Susan, why was this vehicle towed? It was parked in a guest spot without authorization, Susan said. It was not parked there, I said. The contractor left 2 weeks earlier. You filed the tow authorization for a vehicle that was not even on the property. Susan opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at the board. The inspection report indicated a violation. What inspection report? I asked. You never provided one. It is filed, Susan said. Then file it now, I said. Show the board. Susan did not move. Ed cleared his throat. Susan, if there is an inspection report, we need to see it. I will provide it after the meeting, Susan said. No, I said. Provide it now. Because I have proof that no inspection happened. I flipped to the final tab and pulled out 3 printed stills from the doorbell footage. This is footage from my doorbell camera, taken 3 nights before the tow authorization was filed. I slid the stills across the table. That is Susan Garcia at 2:15 in the morning, trespassing on my property to photograph my vehicle. She did not knock. She did not leave a notice. She trespassed, documented my car, and left. The room exploded. Homeowners stood, talking over each other. Jen turned to Marcus and said something I could not hear. Ed held up his hand. Everyone sit down. Sit down. The noise died. Ed looked at Susan. Is this accurate? Susan stared at the stills. That is not trespassing, she said. I was conducting an inspection. At 2 a.m.? I said. Without notice? Without permission? The HOA has the right to inspect common areas, Susan said. My driveway is not a common area, I said. It is private property. Ed looked at Carol. Carol looked at the stills. That is private property, she confirmed. Susan's voice rose. I was documenting a violation. That is my job. Your job is to follow the rules, I said, and you are breaking them. I slid the tabbed binder across the table. Everything is in there. The covenant comparison, the fake pamphlet, the email stalling, the tow yard receipt, the doorbell footage, all of it. Ed opened the binder and started reading. Carol leaned over to look. Susan sat rigid, hands flat on the table. The room stayed quiet. After 2 minutes, Ed closed the binder. This is serious, he said. We need to discuss this in executive session. No, I said. Discuss it now. Make it public. I love watching people get embarrassed. Susan's head snapped toward me. I smiled. Ed hesitated, then nodded. All right. Based on this evidence, it appears the records custodian filed a tow authorization with incorrect information, charged unauthorized fees, and conducted inspections on private property without notice. These are clear violations of HOA policy and Florida statutes. Susan stood. I followed the enforcement protocols. The board authorized this. The board did not authorize trespassing, Ed said. And we did not authorize false tow filings. Carol flipped through her binder again. I have the enforcement protocols here. She read aloud. Inspections must be conducted during daylight hours with advance notice to the homeowner. She looked up. This was not followed. Susan's face flushed. The homeowner was uncooperative. I had to document the violation. You had to follow the rules, Ed said. You did not. The room murmured again. One homeowner in the back row stood. I received a violation from Susan last month, he said. She claimed my fence was too tall, but she never measured it. She just eyeballed it and filed the notice. Is that also protocol? Another homeowner stood. She told me my mailbox was the wrong color, but the covenant does not specify mailbox colors. I repainted it anyway because she threatened a fine. Ed held up his hand. We are not relitigating every case tonight, but it is clear we have a problem. He turned to Susan. Effective immediately, I am suspending your authority to issue violations or authorize tows. All enforcement actions will go through the board for approval. Susan stood. You cannot do that. I just did, Ed said, and if you refuse, I will call for a vote to remove you as records custodian. Susan grabbed her laptop and walked out. The door slammed behind her. The room stayed quiet for a moment, then someone started clapping. It spread. Jen and Marcus clapped. The guy with the fence clapped. Even Carol clapped. I stood there with my binder and my watch and my bucket hat, feeling the adrenaline drain, and tried not to smile too wide. Ed called the meeting back to order. We need to address the immediate issues, he said. First, all fines issued by the records custodian in the past 6 months will be reviewed. If any are found to be based on false or unsupported violations, they will be reversed and refunded. Second, the board will establish a formal records request process with transparent fees and timelines. Third, the tow company contract will be reviewed to ensure compliance with Florida statutes. "What about Susan?" someone asked. Ed looked at Carol. "We will need to consult with the management company and legal counsel," he said. "But based on tonight's evidence, disciplinary action is warranted." "What kind of action?" Jen asked. "That will be determined," Ed said. "But I can tell you this, the board takes these violations seriously. We will not tolerate abuse of authority or homeowner harassment." The meeting adjourned. I walked out into the parking lot with Jen and Marcus. We stood under the streetlights, exhausted and wired. "That was insane," Jen said. "That was necessary," I said. Marcus shook my hand. "You buried her." "We buried her," I said. "This was a team effort." We went home. I slept for 4 hours, woke up, and checked my email. The management company had sent a message. "Dear homeowners, the board of directors has placed the records custodian on administrative leave pending an investigation into enforcement practices. All records requests should be directed to the management company during this period. We apologize for any inconvenience." 3 days later, the City Code Enforcement Office contacted the HOA. Someone had filed a complaint about predatory towing practices, citing multiple incidents of unauthorized tows and mismatched paperwork. The city opened an investigation and requested all tow authorizations filed in the past year. The HOA scrambled. Ed called an emergency meeting. The board voted to suspend all towing contracts until the investigation concluded. A week after that, the investigation results came back. The city found that the HOA had violated Florida Statute 71507, which governs towing procedures on private property. The violations included failure to provide advance notice, failure to verify plate numbers, and failure to maintain accurate records. The city issued a formal warning: stop predatory towing practices or face municipal action and fines. The board reversed the towing policy immediately. From now on, all tows required board approval, verified authorization, and photographic proof of the violation. The tow company lost the HOA contract. The management company revised the records request policy to cap fees at $50 and require turnaround within 5 business days. Susan was issued a written warning for harassment behavior. The board did not fire her, but they stripped her enforcement authority and reassigned records duties to the management company. She stopped attending meetings. Her car disappeared from the neighborhood during the day. Rumors spread that she was looking for another HOA job, but no one would hire her after word got around. The funny part came 2 months later. Susan filed a complaint with the board, claiming I had harassed her by posting the doorbell footage in the neighborhood group chat. I had not posted it anywhere, but the complaint triggered a review, and the board asked to see the footage again. When they pulled the file, they discovered Susan's phone had died mid-rant during one of her earlier enforcement visits, captured on another homeowner's doorbell camera. She had been yelling at a retired teacher about a trash can, and her phone battery died while she was holding it up to show the violation photos. She froze in place, stared at the blank screen, and walked away without finishing the sentence. The footage went viral in the neighborhood. People made memes. Someone set it to music. Susan never lived it down. Marcus sold his house 6 months later and moved to a neighborhood with no HOA. Jen ran for the board and won. I stayed, kept my head down, and focused on my job. But every time I parked in my guest spot, I checked the dashboard for the guest pass, the windshield for the permit decal, and the curb for any sign of a tow truck. The paranoia faded over time, but it never fully disappeared. The HOA had taught me a lesson. The rules only protect you if someone enforces them fairly, and fairness is never guaranteed. But I learned something else too. You can fight back. You can gather proof, build a file, and force the system to work. It takes time, it takes energy, and it takes a willingness to stand in front of a room full of strangers and call out the lies. But it works. And when it works, when the liar walks out and the room starts clapping, when the city steps in and the board reverses policy to avoid municipal trouble, it feels like justice. Not perfect justice, not Hollywood justice, but real justice. The kind where the predator gets a written warning and the rules get tightened just enough to stop the next abuse. I kept the tabbed binder on my desk for a year, just in case. I kept the doorbell footage backed up in 3 places. I kept the tow yard receipt in a file marked HOA evidence, along with the fake pamphlet, the email chain, and the covenant comparison. I never needed them again, but I was ready. The reserve at Kingsbridge Design Review Association is still there, still sending emails, still holding meetings. But the towing stopped, the fake violation stopped, the harassment stopped. And every time I see a reflective safety vest in a thrift store window, I think of Susan and smile. Take care, and I will see you next time.